Hello and welcome to 5 Questions in 5 Minutes, and I'm extremely pleased to say that we've finally tempted Catherine Powell, Global Head of Hosting at Airbnb, to join us. Thank you so much, Catherine. And I'm going to kick straight off with the first question. America versus the UK, what have you learned about the difference in working cultures?
Well, Paul, it's great to see you. Sorry that it's taken so long to get this. I've actually worked in lots of different countries. I've worked in France, Germany, obviously the UK. I've worked in Australia. I've worked in the US now for the last 4 years. They're very different. They're all very different cultures. I would say Australia was kind of pretty male dominated as a culture to work in. Germany was very rule following. France had a little bit more panache. You could be a bit more creative in the way you worked. The UK obviously feels like home and is the one that I'm most familiar with. And the US is, even though at the moment I'm working for a startup, it's a pretty corporate culture.
The last great book you read and why?
So the book actually that I'm reading at the moment is called White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. Actually, I've got it here because I keep it on my desk because it's a good reference point and it helps me anchor on what's important around racism, particularly as a white person. I'm the sponsor of our Black at ERG, Employee Resource Group at Airbnb. And I have to think a lot about where systemic racism shows up and how I, as a white person, show up when I'm talking to my Black colleagues. And it's not, it's not easy. So reading.
No, and I just, funnily enough, read a book called Do I Belong Here by the actor David Harewood. I highly recommend that. It's amazing on that subject. Airbnb. I remember, I'm old enough to remember Craigslist when I wanted to find a room to hire. Whether in the next 10 years, Airbnb.
Yeah, I mean, Craigslist is still very much around. We've seen the most enormous shift in travel, as you yourself having now spent periodically times in the Peloponnese. It's the new flexibility that you've found, that we all discovered post-pandemic, and people are less tethered to their place of work. And I think what we've seen as Airbnb is that we offer everything that people want when they want to travel, and they want to be more curious with where they go. They want to stay longer because they're working from home now. And I think Airbnb has been, certainly during the pandemic, if it sounds okay to say this, because obviously I'm very aware of the pandemic, but we were the perfect product for the pandemic. We were homes close to where people live that people could go and travel to safely in their car and stay there safely with loved ones. And we've continued to see the pent-up demand for travel, the passionate desire to connect with people, with your loved ones, with your friends. And Airbnb is everywhere. We're in over 220 countries, in over 100,000 cities and towns. We have everything from private rooms, which if you think about inflation, recession, is affordable, through to homes where two families can go and stay and spend time together. So I think we will continue to lead where travel is going because of basically the resilience and flexibility of our business model and our platform. And
I suppose in tougher times, you allow people that other source of income as well, don't you? From using.
Yes, I mean, we have people turning to hosting now more than ever. I mean, Airbnb was founded during a recession when the two of the co-founders couldn't pay their rent and they blew up their mattresses. People are now turning to hosting because, I mean, all you need is a spare room.
Can men, this is a serious question, can men be house husbands?
If I was to rephrase the question, can men partner in such a way where, they are not always the ones who are working and they are there to support the family and their partners? Absolutely. I have been very, very lucky that I have a husband who, basically we've kind of compromised throughout our married life. My husband, Hugh, was a diplomat. And so the first few postings, we went to Paris, we went to Berlin, and I followed him. And I managed to work, which was great. not always easy. Then we moved to Australia for Disney, and he followed me. He actually worked in Australia, so we were both working at that time. We went back to Paris for Disney, and Hugh, in fact, then went to London. He worked in London, I worked in Paris, and we made it work. And then we came out to the US, and Hugh's basically taken unpaid leave from the Foreign Office. He does some consultancy, and he's there supporting me, the three boys, our dog, and the house, and keeping everything going. And I have to say, I wouldn't have been able to have the big career that I had at Disney or the big role that I now have at Airbnb without having hands-on support from Hugh. So yes, absolutely, they can do it. And I think a lot of successful marriages are based on that compromise. And I think a lot of successful careers are because you have somebody supporting you at home. And in my case at the moment, I have Hugh.
You must, in your time, have used consumer research in various forms. What would you say the best and worst thing about going out and speaking to consumers is?
Well, it's funny you say that. At both Disney and, in fact, Airbnb, people talk about consumer research, consumer insights. In fact, what many companies do is they talk to themselves. They talk to the consumers they know really well, their guests, in the case of Disney. In the case of Airbnb, it's UX research. It's the people who are using our app. And that's really important to know, what's going on, certainly for the technology side from the platform. That's how you iterate and improve a platform. But I think true insights, where consumer insights and consumer research is really great, is when you understand who are you not reaching? What are people doing? What trends are out there? What future trends might be around the corner that you need to anticipate or be aware of, and not necessarily over rotate towards it, but at least have it inform your thinking. So I think there's, I've seen UX research, obviously working in tech, consumer research where Disney talked to their guests, but then the real insights as to what's going on, I think is incredibly important.
What did Disney teach you that you then took into your next role, if anything? I mean, it must have 15 years or something.
Yeah, 15 years at Disney, you learn a lot. There's a lot that I learned at Disney that I was able to take with me. A lot is how I've developed as a leader, who I am now as a leader. I think a focus on rigor and excellence. Disney is pretty demanding in that sense. And obviously working in the parks, that real focus on the guest experience and how to leverage creativity and technology. I mean, in the case of the parks, it was industrial engineering, not software engineering, but understanding the role that creativity plays in creating the best possible consumer experience was something. I mean, when I joined Airbnb, I joined to run experiences. And so I was absolutely taking the guest experience and how you can create a connection with guests, between guests and hosts. In the case of Airbnb, it was between cast members and guests. In the case of the parks, but really how you understand what that experiential moment is that can be really transformative and memorable. And that there are many parallels between the work I was doing at the end of Disney in the parks and the work I'm doing now at Airbnb.
Just a sort of, again, subsidiary question with that. Was there a technical thing as well that you would?
Well, obviously I've moved from a large media and entertainment company into a small, you said it's not a startup, it's kind of a small, tech company based in Silicon Valley that has, 5,000 employees, and is very, very focused on one thing, on technology, on how we leverage the platform to create this human connection. Yeah. Disney is a very, very large corporation. So I worked in many different roles across Disney and had lots of different businesses that I touched. The most recent one that was probably the most applicable for Airbnb was the parks. And yeah, you mentioned tech. We had Imagineering, Walt Disney Imagineering. They are industrial engineers, but they're creating rides. They leverage technology to help with the storytelling on those rides, whether it's augmented reality or whether it's some interaction that you can play when you enter a land like Galaxy's Edge and you've got more storytelling. Disney was steeped and still is in the digital evolution of the guest experience. Airbnb is, you're thoroughly immersed in technology. I mean, when I arrived, it was, it was a challenge. It was a challenge to kind of earn my stripes with engineers, especially as I was going in a kind of, a fairly high level role with engineers working for me at the time who were kind of like, what are you doing here? You know, you're not an engineer, you've got no engineering background. And that's been difficult to work in tech without that. But you learn to you learn to listen, you learn to communicate. It can be sometimes a very, very different type of conversation, one you're not used to. And, you learn very quickly where you can add value.
I thank you, Catherine. I mean, that's such a fascinating, because what those two businesses, which are so familiar to everyone, that you give such an insight into how different that is, the two are on the inside. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us for this today. It really, really is. I'm very, very, very grateful. Thank you so much.